I have to admit something. My memory is actually not that great. I don't actually remember a lot of my childhood. But something that I did rely on to help me remember a lot of events in my childhood is this. My mom would always say, do you remember when you were 12 and you threw up in that restaurant because you had food poisoning? And I would think back to being age of 12 and I don't actually remember. And then she would reference an event and say, remember what happened after that? You threw up repeatedly. But really what I depend on this is what I'm showing you, this visual aid here. So growing up, my mom always took me to the movie theater. Of course, without captions. So I would sit there and the big screen. And, being a little kid, you'd think that I'd be restless, but actually I wasn't. I was fascinated by cinema. The way that the cinematography happened, the picture, the lights, everything, the zooming in, the zooming out, how all of it happened. And seeing all these different pictures without words, without the talking, but all of those pictures come together to tell a story. And I thought that was quite powerful. Except for there was one movie that I'll never forget that did not do it for me. Who's seen E.T.? Okay, so it seems as though the whole audience pretty much has seen E.T. Now, that's the first movie I remember seeing in the theater. Those before that I don't really remember. And I remember being a young kid with my mom and being very excited to go to the movie theater. And then at the end I remember crying crying like crazy. And I remember that night I had a hard time sleeping because of that. And there was one part specifically that I remember at the opening scene. It opened in the evening in the woods, and there were these strobe lights, and it was very windy, and I didn't know what exactly was happening. And I saw the cars and the trucks and everything, and the lights, and the doors open, and then they come out. And I remember the cinematography specifically. It started at the ground level, looking at the feet, and then moved up. And I remember it looking at the waist and zooming in on that area. And I didn't know exactly what was going on. It was a man and what they were doing. I knew there was some kind of chase and someone had taken off, but I didn't really remember that. And then there was the story of the flying bicycle and coming back down. And then E.T. died at the end because he was sick, and they found him and they carried him home into the bathroom. He's laying on the floor, and the boys there crying, caring for him. And then it goes back to the outside where the police are there, and everybody has come around, and the truck is there, and a guy comes out of the truck. And again, it does that whole pan from the floor up, and then it shows that chain there that's at the waist. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't see the face. I didn't know what this person's job was. But for some reason, I see these photos, and then I see this information, and that's all I see. And then I see that they take E.T. And so that's all I got from it. And I thought, that's it? I knew from that point forward, though, I wanted to make movies because I wanted to bring pictures together to tell a story without relying on any kind of story. I wanted the pictures to tell the story and be the movie. And so that's where my journey started, and I've moved forward from there. So then I went to Gallaudet, and I majored in film, and I took classes there. And Facundo was one of my faculty members who was hearing but signed not too well, but he didn't want to have interpreters. He's now no longer with us, but he did a good job. He taught us about different things and different projects that we had, and one of these projects was visual expression. First we talked about shooting individual scenes and trying to tell a story, but this teacher actually had a hard time explaining the concept. He said that he wanted the class to do something to be able to express themselves. And I thought, okay, express myself. So now he's hearing, remember, and he was going to give us an example. And he had shown us work from a previous university. And he pulled it up, and it seemed pretty strange to me because it was just focusing on the guy's face. It didn't do anything. Then it would go down and focus on the grass. And then you'd see a lawnmower. And then you'd see a fire. And then you'd see a guy running. And then you would see the guy again, and I didn't really understand what it was. It seemed kind of odd way of expressing oneself, and the faculty member said there was music that went with it, and it was sound, and he said that was very profound for his life, and so he wanted the class to be able to express themselves through this project. And I didn't want to do it that way. I wanted to do it in my own style, but I've struggled to figure out what my style of doing that, because I didn't know exactly how to find the words. So I didn't exactly know what he wanted from us. I mean, understand that I did the project and I turned it in, and I thought it was okay, but I didn't really have a great experience about that. After Gallaudet, I went to RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, and I focused more on technical aspects of things. I took a lot of different courses, like cinematography, learning about lens and micromillimeters, and learning how to do lighting or different cameras, having cameras at different angles. And one course I took, they actually had a course, which I was surprised by this, that was called Grammar of the Film Language. Film language? I didn't know that film had a language. It's not like they hand out vocabulary and tell you film language and it was just a couple pages. It was a whole book, and there was a lot of different vocabulary and terms associated with it. For example, these right here. I didn't know that. Okay, close up. Okay, wide, medium, okay. Wide shot, medium shot, okay. And I'm going to abbreviate this for the rest of my presentation so you know what I'm talking about. So I get it. Okay, we've got the house, we've got the person, and so that's a wide shot. And then you zoom in and you go closer in. Okay, I got it. So the medium shot. And then you show the guy and what he's doing. And then a close-up shot just shows their face, really close in. And that's to show the emotion and to emphasize in that moment what's going on. And so that's what the close-up is used for. And so those are just 3 examples. There are ones that show the dolly that goes back and forth, the crane up and down, the diagonal shot. They have a bunch of different ones. But there was another one that I didn't quite understand. The voice-over or off-screen narration. Okay, so if you're thinking about the news or film, I remember being a little boy, poor. They show a little boy who's poor and hungry, but there would be a whole story associated with it. You know, that he was an orphan, and they would like list the statistics of that third world country and talking about poverty and needing your financial support. But you see this boy who looks very poor and hungry, but the message that you're hearing goes along with that. And so those two together become one holistic story. And so that's the purpose of the voiceover. But I was thinking, how does this exactly apply to a deaf movie? Now there's even more terms. Look at all of these. And each of these squares has tons and tons of vocabulary and words and stories and scripts. And so how you open and introduce the characters, and then how you show the conflict, and how the conflict becomes worse, and then how you reach the climax. So if there's a story and something's happening and you see all these different climaxes happening, and then what the solution is and coming to that happy ending. And that's generally the structure for American films anyways, the happy ending. And there are rules for how that must happen that you have to follow. And because you're encouraged to follow that structure, and so that's what's being dictated in these rules. So in class there were a few of us that were deaf. It's Rochester Institute of Technology, and I was really excited to learn this vocabulary and these rules and try to kind of rearrange it so that it would work for a deaf film. And the result was the first film I made in RIT, and the goal of it was to have a deaf person signing, so you show them signing on the screen, and then you could say cut to, and then just show the hands that are out of the screen, but that wouldn't work, so we had to go back. We had to cut and do it again. And so we had a hard time. It was very challenging trying to get that in there. And I thought, okay, well, if we show the close-up, you can change your signing so it could still fit in the space. I thought that was something that could still happen. So let me give you an example of what it looked like. Now, there's a couple things that are interesting. So, I was a freshman, and when working on that project, I had all these different ideas, and I was trying to do as much as I could at that time. And I thought for the audience it was pretty cool. And I sat in the audience as well, and I felt like something was missing. It just didn't feel natural. Thinking about the deaf world and what I see, it just wasn't shown. That essence wasn't there in the film. It felt like it was a different world. And then the other thing is the telephone with deaf people, which is really a mistake on my part. Why did I include the telephone? I don't know. And so I struggled to start from there with these different projects and trying to adhere to these rules and the language of film, and I really wanted to be creative with the structure so that it could become more natural to really show what the deaf world looks like on screen, but I hadn't gotten there yet. So I got so caught up in film language that it was actually restricting me because I was having such a hard time trying to get a hold on the film language. So I decided to put that to the side. And I was also getting caught up in all these rules. And those rules came from tradition and people that were very auditory based. And even if you're from other countries, everyone had the commonality of being able to hear and have auditory input. And so that was the part that I was getting stuck in. But I'm a visual person as a deaf person. I don't even think about sound. So what I did is I thought about the world and how my worldview applies to film. And that's what I decided to do. So you've heard of the word script, writing a script. And then you put colon, and you say treehouse, and then you show the character, and then it's paragraph format. And my first language is sign language, and so writing a script. Of course, I can write English. My English is pretty good, but it was a struggle to try to follow this script format. But when I signed, it was much more comfortable. Now, Bernard Bragg and Ben Bain, B-A-H-A-N, both teachers, know that ASL has cinematography in it, cinematic features of the language. So it parallels that of a film when you actually look at ASL, because there's the close-ups, the medium shots, the wide shots. Of course, it's not exactly the same. There are parallels. And so I actually think that sign language has more flexibility and is more advanced than actual films. And I think stuff is shown in a much more advanced. So instead of writing an actual script, I decided why not do an ASL script where I could be filmed doing a story. So one of my projects, that's what I actually did. And here's what it looked like. So that was my first ASL script. And I wasn't working solo. I had a team that worked together on it. We had deaf people that had different areas of focus, like working on the actors, the acting coach, the props, the film people, the script people, all coming together working on this as a team. And it was done completely in sign. There was nothing written down. And this is the result of it. And I felt like this is the future for us. Signing. It's much more visual. And you're able to see everything. And everyone who signs it and signs understands it right away. There's nothing that needs to be explained. And I decided that that was the way that things needed to be done, via an ASL script. And here's yet another part.